to Walking Movies. I'm Nick, and I've just seen Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. Is it Final Reckoning? Yes, because it was Dead Reckoning last time, wasn't it? It's the Final Reckoning. And I've got thoughts, but I'm going to get home and then I'm going to record my thoughts because, yeah, I think I've got a lot to say about this movie. All right, let's talk Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. I am a big fan of the Mission Impossible franchise. So when they announced they were doing like a preview thing, I was really excited because it meant I got to see the film early. And in IMAX. I paid the IMAX upcharge. And I'm glad I did. Like it was shot for IMAX and it looked beautiful in IMAX. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the actual film itself. And I'm very conflicted because it wasn't a bad film. But I would say it was probably one of the weaker entries. And it's possible that I say that because the last few films, Rogue Nation, Fallout, and even Dead Reckoning Part 1, as it was called at the time, I really enjoyed. Dead Reckoning Part 1 was not as good, was not as strong as Fallout or Rogue Nation, but it was still really good films. I really enjoyed Dead Reckoning Part 1, but when I watched it like a second time, I kind of didn't enjoy it as much as that first time watching it. And it's a long film. This is a long film, right? It's 2 hours 45. And it's really weird in that they cram a lot of stuff into that runtime, and yet I think in hindsight it probably should have been split up into 2 films and had a chance for things to breathe, because it goes at kind of like such a pace that I found it hard to keep up at times. And also there's things where they don't happen in real time, like you're watching something happen and then you kind of like cut to a conversation about what they're going to do, and it's like, well, it was that before this happened? Was this after? Like, I'm guessing it was before, but it just seemed like things felt weirdly placed in the film. It kept kind of like flitting back and forth, and it was just odd. I'm not used to that with a Mission Impossible film. Now, what I will say that I think is really good is this does really tie things up in terms of there's lots of callbacks to other films. I mean, at the beginning of the film, you see a lot of, as the film starts, you see a lot of clips from older Mission Impossible films to remind you of key characters, key moments, and things like that. And so I think this film really works well if you are familiar with the other films in the series, or if you've recently watched them. Now, we actually watched all the Mission Impossible films last year. Not last year, must have been a year before now, thinking about it. But on the lead up to Dead Reckoning Part 1 coming out. So they're kind of still fresh in my memory, the film. So, a lot of that was good. But if you're watching it and you're not familiar with the films that much, or if you haven't watched all the films, there'll be things in this film that you won't really appreciate as much as you might have done otherwise. Although that said, they do a good job of, when certain things happen, they make sure that you're kind of aware of the context of it still. So, you could go into this blind, but you're going to get the most out of this if you are familiar with the film series. But this was the first time that I walked out of a Mission Impossible film and thought, if this was the end, I'd be quite happy. I'm kind of at a place now where, like, where can they go? You know? And, like, originally this was called Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Part 2, and they were kind of, like, hinting that this was going to be the end of the series. But they've now kind of, like, walked that back and said, like, maybe not. But it was really interesting. When Dead Reckoning Part 1 came out, it did, like, $500 million, over $500 million, and was like, I just had to look it up. It was the 10th biggest film that year, but it didn't do as well as previous entries had done, and they've gone back and retconned it. So the last film is called Dead Reckoning, and then this one is called The Final Reckoning, rather than Part 1 and Part 2 as they had originally announced them to be. And I wonder if that's because of maybe a bit of fatigue, or they're worried that, you know, the franchise is dying off a little bit. But I mean, overall, I enjoyed the film, but it is long. It does feel long. I did look at my watch a few times and think, you know, are we near the end? Because I'd kind of had enough, and I don't normally feel like that with Mission Impossible films. I mean, of course, the stunts are incredible. What Tom Cruise does at 62 is disgusting. Almost 62. Like, how he does the stuff he does, I don't know. And why he does the stuff that he does, I don't know. There's quite a long sequence here that involves him being underwater, and he's wearing this weird mask. And the weird thing about it is, because of how the mask is, and it's kind of like magnified, at times it makes it look like his head is kind of superimposed, and it probably wasn't. It was probably him doing all of the work, but because of what he's wearing, it doesn't actually do it justice, which is a bit of a shame for him. But you know, look, it's always good to see the cast back together. You know, these films do have a great cast. It's good that you've got an end to this story, which, you know, did bring back some characters from previous entries. You know, I had a good time, but I wasn't as satisfied as I've been coming out of other Mission Impossible films. And, you know, it's disappointing for me to feel like that, because I do really enjoy this series. But, you know, if this does end up being the last one, that's cool. And I never thought I'd say that. But it happened to me with Fast and Furious as well. Like, that's a franchise that I will go and watch the next one, but I haven't really cared for the last few entries. Like, I've gone from really enjoying them to it's a bit of a slog. And I really didn't think I was going to do it with this film. Like, I've really been looking forward to it. I haven't watched the trailers. I've tried to avoid spoilers. But overall, it's a good film, but it's not a great film, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to see how it does, as I said, because the last one did underperform a little bit. So will this one, with the hype around it, you know, do better, or is it diminishing returns? It'll be interesting to see. So, you know, look, if you're a fan of this series of films, should you go and watch this film? Of course you should. Is it worth paying the extra to see it in something like IMAX? You know, IMAX is expensive. I think it was worth it. You know, it did look good. Things were shot specifically for it. You know, when you got the full IMAX experience, when the picture kind of like takes up the whole screen, and it happened a lot. Very impressive. But, like I say, overall, I was a little underwhelmed. It felt a bit of a shame that I ended up feeling like that. And what I would say, I mean, my screening was pretty packed because of the fact it was a special event. You know, it's an early preview of it, and it was in IMAX. But it was quite a tepid reception at the end of the film. And, you know, it was on late. My screen didn't finish till about 20 to midnight. So that may have played into it a little bit for some people. I wasn't tired or anything like that watching it, but what I mean is, it is quite late for people to go to the cinema generally, and especially watch a film of that length. But yeah, the fact that people were a little bit muted. I heard a few people say, "Oh yeah, I enjoyed it," but you want more than "I enjoyed it," So it's a good film, but I am slightly disappointed. I'm left a bit underwhelmed, and that's not good. But not every film is going to be a home run, right? It's a beloved film series. It's been on for this is the 8th film. Started 29 years ago, and they can't all be winners. But I think because the last few had been so good, that it's a shame that I've come away from this one feeling that it was a bit of a missed opportunity. I rate films out of 4 because I'm an idiot, and I would say it's definitely a 2, maybe a 2.5. But it's not higher, and that's a bit disappointing. But that's just how I feel about this Mission Impossible film, and I will watch it again. I believe that my wife and daughter want to go and see it. If there's a chance for us to all go and see it, I'd happily go and see it again with them. If not, I'll obviously just let them go and watch it on their own, and I'll catch it on TV, when it hits streaming. But yeah, I'm glad I saw it. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it in the way that I have done with other films in the series. So you can't win them all. So if you're a fan of Mission Impossible, I think you will enjoy it, but I would lower your expectations. For me, it is not up there with the likes of Rogue Nation, or Fallout, or even Dead Reckoning. Whether you call it part 1 or not is your business. But yeah, if you watched this far, thank you. And if you want to hear my other thoughts of films when I go and see them, please subscribe. Until next time, remember that Flynn lives.